and roll.
Well,
I guess I
welcome
gotta
to
try and
another.
keep this at a flattering angle.
Get situated, man. Get comfy. Yeah, you don't want the low shot.
Hello.
Oh my goodness, we're recording, and this is what people are seeing. Good Lord. Well, Kevin, why don't you tell me a little bit about yourself, man? And if you want, what do you do professionally?
So I'm an improv teacher at Second City in Chicago, and yeah, still employed in that way. And every once in a while, we'll do a Zoom class, so online improv, which of course is a completely different animal, but better than nothing. And I mean, like even this, like, oh look, I get to meet a new person, and if we didn't do this, like, probably not going to run into each other in
Exactly.
Chicago or Maryland.
Well,
So, yeah, this is cool.
Improv is probably one of my favorite things. I mean, that's what I try and tell people with the podcast is just conversation. It seems like life's already so structured. It's nice to just relax and be able to, crack out an impression. One of my all-time favorite shows, Whose Line Is It Anyway? The amount of talent that goes into that to be able to do like a musical number and it sound good. Like I've heard rap songs that take months and months to produce that don't sound anything as good as what's his name? Oh my God.
Wayne Brady.
Wayne Brady that sits there and does this epic like songs of the beach and you're like, what? I have sand in my pants and just keeps going. It's like it's perfect.
Right. Yeah. And the thing is, like, all that is so I think this is true with all improv. There is a little bit of you either have it or you don't. You either were born with it or you don't. I think that's a small amount. I think a bigger amount is we have an entire training center that would argue the opposite, that we can train you to get good, that we all have a lot of this in us. And yeah, Wayne Brady is incredibly talented. It's not that he didn't work at it. He didn't just get, it just didn't come down from the sky for him. He worked at it, and it's trainable. So even those things that you marvel at, put enough, it's just like shooting free throws. Put enough work into it, you can be good at it.
It feels like
there's ways to set up your rhymes and all that.
When you
techniques.
Encounter people every single day, there are some people that you encounter where you're like, how do you like function? It seems like, you look at them, they're not very good at speech because speech is like a muscle, being able to talk to people. It's really hard to kind of sense a vibe and sense the weight of the room, which you have to do with improv. And there's some people that are like, I'm just not good at speaking. It's like, they say they can't be trained. It's like you can be trained. I think the main thing that's holding a lot of people back from doing improv or trying to even just be real is the factor of we care so much about what other people think of us that we're too afraid to act out or be ourselves. Or it's just like this thing where you feel like it's that just conflicting thing of should I do this because what if it goes like this and then you get this anxiety and this fear. It's the same thing I used to get in speech class, and once I graduated high school, that came out of me because my cousin was like, what are you going to care about these people that think this of you for 2 minutes and you're never going to see these people again? And I'm like, it's a good point.
That's what a lot of improv teachers will say is like, oh, that scene that you thought was just bad that you just did, where is it? It's gone. Move ahead. Who cares? And I also think you're right in that here's one reason I know I'm a better improviser now than say when I was in my 20s. I don't care anymore. I don't give two rips about I don't have that little filter or that little voice that says like, oh my God, you should care about how funny people find you. You should care, oh my God, you're too short or whatever. All those voices of doubt used to dominate my brain. And so that makes it harder to get to the good stuff, the creative stuff. And maybe as I got older or maybe as I continued to train more, you keep those voices at bay. You go like, I don't care what you say. I'm moving along. I'm going to take a chance here. If it falls flat on its face, good. I don't care. I'm prepared for that. And that's the thing. When I'm teaching an improv class, that's what I'm telling my students. Like, here's your chance to be in a no judgment zone. We all have your back. Take some chances. if you're not failing, you're not trying, and no one's going to bust your chops for, trying something that didn't go right. Who cares?
What do you consider probably the most valuable tool in your improv arsenal? Like something that you kind of stick to that's like your go-to bread and butter?
This is technique wise, is giving everything to my scene partner, like making sure that they are successful, that they're taken care of, setting them up. So it's almost like maybe this is metaphorically, but I guess you could do this on a stage. It's almost like bending over on a stage. You're in a show, you're in a scene, and your scene partner's there, and you're like bending over going like, man, I hope you don't kick me. Man, that would be terrible if you kicked me right now. But like, so I'm looking to metaphorically do that all the time. Just lob softballs up to my scene partner, and whether it's at my expense or not, 'cause it's not really at my expense, it's my character's expense. I don't give a shit about him. So I'll just let people tee off to make them look good. So that is one of the little mottos of improv as I teach it, is you make your scene partner look good, we're all going to look good. You're going to look good.
Do you try and incorporate it more like in everyday life? Like, when we talk about improv, you just mean like kind of running with a scene and kind of going with the flow. But like, you ever tried the route of impressions or trying to do a little bit of improv that way?
Oh yeah. Yeah. There's still obviously lots of room for shtick and gags and impressions and, nonsense. And I'm lying if I don't say I don't do that all the time. In fact, I'll give you my latest one, and when I say latest, I'm going to say in the last 6 months, I can't get enough of like the old Louisiana sheriff type. Like that just turns into my go-to. It's like, well, look who we got here. We got ourselves a Yankee boy come down here trying to eat our crawfish. Is that right? Well, don't go like that around here. In fact, I did a podcast thing last week. I'm saying yes to all podcasts. I want to stay involved, and they all, they're all fun, they're all valid, they're all great. Yours is, I've watched some of yours. Yours are awesome. Dave said great things about you. I did this one last week where it's like it's improvised. It's a guy so there's a premise. He's like marooned on an island, and on this island are talking animals. I'm like, yes, absolutely, fine with me. He goes, what we want you to do, you're going to play a talking animal. Like, just make up a character, choose an animal, and we're going to improvise. So I'm like, I'm in, absolutely. And so I had this weasel character going. Like in my head, I wrote it to him. Like, hey, I'm going to try this weasel, and he's going to like always brag and top your story and name drop and just kind of be a pain in the ass. And then this other guy was playing like a hyena, and they had started. I hadn't spoken yet. I had an idea as to what my weasel was going to sound like. I was going to, go like, yeah, hey man, we're gonna get on this boat. We're gonna go off into the coral reef. And we're gonna, I do it all the time. I'm the best at it. Like this kind of guy.
Hyped up energy.
Yeah, and a little bit of Brooklynish, maybe a little bit of that New York type of accent. And the hyena guy starts up, and his voice, I'm like, oh, that's kind of the weasel voice. That's his hyena. It was the voice I was gonna do. I'm like, I can't do my voice. I can't do that Brooklyn high pitched guy, high energy guy. So I fell back on Louisiana guy. So I was a weasel. It was like, yeah, I like a good buttered rum. Like just went to my go-to. So and I also do a lot of doddering old man characters where I call myself out going, well, I did another show tonight where I was like, what? Where are we? Who's there? Like,
what did they say, Sonny? I'm sorry, I couldn't hear you over the tapioca pudding.
Right. So I gotta watch my too much of my go-tos. Like you gotta push yourself into different directions.
Once I hear it, I can kind of recreate it. Like, you ever seen SpongeBob where they're selling the chocolate bars and they come
No.
across the old woman in the retirement home, but like a woman comes out, she's got no arms or legs, and she looks like she's like severely burned. And she goes, "What are they selling? They're selling chocolates. What? I remember when they first invented chocolate. I always hated it." You know?
That's great. Absolutely. I mean, but God forbid if somebody in a scene, if one guy is doing like an Irish accent and another guy's doing a Jamaican accent.
Those are
I'm
strong accents, man.
Right. I'm screwed. Like I will probably waver between both. Like I'm very impressionable. In fact, if I'm hanging out with 3 Canadians, by the end of that hour, I'll be going like, "Oh yeah, I like to play hockey, eh?" Like, and don't even notice that I've completely lost my own identity and just glommed onto theirs.
So it's actually a thing, what you're talking about, where you're trying not to pick up on somebody's accent or be able to talk like them. It's what it is. It's our brain trying to simulate with things around us by trying to pick up on these certain things that are going on to simulate into it to be for a survival thing. I started
Right.
noticing it because everywhere I worked, I was a minority somewhere, whether it was working with Latino people or whether it was working with Irish people. I would start to pick up their accent, like, "Why are you doing me fucking voice?" And I'm like, "I'm sorry, I didn't mean to do it. I was just, I've been around you so much, and now I keep picking it up, and I can't not do it." And it's like, I always say, it's like the hardest thing to walk into a Chinese restaurant and still talk without like either squinting or without speeding up really fast when you talk. That sounds terrible, but it's
I know.
true, because my
Right.
buddy he's Vietnamese and he works as a sushi guy, and he doesn't really talk, but as soon as people walk in, they hear the whole environment and everything, and they start to simulate that. He just looks at him like, "Do you want an egg roll? What do you want? What are you saying to me right now?" And they're like, "Oh my God, I'm so sorry."
Right. Totally an American guy. I don't know what your problem is. Right. Oh my God, that's hilarious. But yeah, there is a lot of. I mean, I tell my students an easy, and it's not really a cheat, is an easy technique is just mirror your scene partner. Somebody comes in with a strong character. There's nothing wrong with you, mirroring back what they're doing. Because now to the audience, they're like, "Oh my God, like those two are a part of a culture that I don't even understand," or like they're in their world, So if I say like, "Hey Billy, give me that tire. We're gonna change this wagon wheel," and I go like, "Okay, Pa, I don't mind helping," right? And we do that, and now people are sitting in the audience going like, "Oh, all right, we're watching like a Little House on the Prairie type of scene here," like. So there's nothing wrong with mirroring each other. It gives it almost like a tone or a culture. It's
Well,
not a cheat. You're still improvising.
two people need to have a rapport too. Like, I mean, I don't really consider myself an improvist, more like just I can just go off the cuff a little bit, which is kind of like
Yeah,
improv. But like when I do these, like you can tell sometimes like an episode, somebody will send me a message like, "Man, you really worked hard at that one," because you can see some people just aren't as open and start, they're a little bit more confined. So where like I'm asking, I'm going off. I try my best to make sure, no dead air. I always like to keep a conversation going, living in the moment kind of. And it's
right.
not easy. Obviously, some people it comes a little bit more natural to others, but like I always find it fun engaging in a conversation. But it's like I feel like if you get an awkward silence, it's like you got to say something there, even if it's a joke to make the laughter. Cause like it's all about really just it is a skill, man. I will say it is definitely a talent. I'm not saying I have it, but when it comes to the concept of like, you've probably been on stage before, you've probably been trying to do a scene and you ask maybe the audience for something and somebody tosses out something where you're like, "Why the fuck would you bring that up right now?" Like, do a joke about 9/11. It's like, well, that
Right.
is so hard to do. It's not saying it's impossible, but like, I heard a butter factory. Somebody said butter factory. Nobody said a butter factory.
I, I've never, that's hilarious. I've never made up that I'd heard something, but I will definitely, like you did, I will act like I didn't hear the suggestion that somebody yelled out that was just nasty or, stupid or inappropriate. So when I'm doing a student show, so there's times where the students will have an 8-week class, and at the end of the 8 weeks they do a show for friends and family, and I'll host it, and they'll do a bunch of improv games like on Whose Line Is It Anyway, but I'll host and just set up all the games so they don't have to worry about that. So I'll be out there on the front of the stage going like, hey, can we have a suggestion of a location these two can do the scene on? And somebody might say, proctologist's office. And I'll go like, or, or someplace, and I this is implied. I never say this. I never like rag on somebody directly, but I want to say, do you really want to see this scene in a proctologist's office? Is that what you're looking for? I mean, how? And then, here's another thing I do say to my students. I'm like, you know what? You're gonna get those. You're gonna get, in your improv career, you're gonna get gynecologist's office, proctologist's office. You're gonna get, hi, can I have an object? They're gonna say dildo. I mean, all crowds do, everywhere, all the time. And I say, like, be smarter than that. Use their suggestion in a smart way. Don't go to some kind of porn scene or something disgusting. Like, proctologist's office, fine. These two guys, maybe we start the scene and they're talking about their tea times tomorrow. Maybe they're talking about like, I can't get the Wi-Fi to work in this office. It doesn't have to be putting hands in butts the whole time.
It's not the only thing hitting with a 9-iron, like that whole thing, coming out with something like that. But like, I have a past guest that was on here way back when I was doing these in person. He's a friend of my family, but he does an improv thing at like this Italian, very serious, high class dining restaurant, which I'm like, this is the worst place to do improv when people are ordering $70 entrees to be able to like, but his style of improv though, because what he goes to immediately is take the shirt off, and he's a big guy. So that's his whole stick. And I'm like, this is bad. I have to watch your sweaty meatballs, and then I have to eat sweaty meatballs. It's not fun. It's like, you can see it too, because I consider that a little bit lazy. Like, it's just an easy way to get people to laugh by, like, because comedy has turned into this thing where you got to make fun of yourself. Or you got to do something like this to be funny. And it's like, you see with Whose Line Is It Anyway, the advancement of that show from where it was in the past to where it has been in the past couple of years. And it took a bit of a turn with Drew Carey's Improvaganza, but it was, you get to see people literally spur of the moment, comedians literally just on the tip of their tongue coming out with something, being able to craft out a song, be able to do scenes from a hat, being able to do impressions. And I mean, I want to shout out David, especially for setting this up for us from Way Hot Sauce. I want to do a scene with you. And
sure.
I'm really hoping we can do this. I want you to pick your best accent, best impersonation, whichever you want. And I want you to sell me David's hot sauce. And I'll try and pick an accent to kind of counteract with it.
All right. Well, I already burned 2 of them, so
you can use one that you've used before.
Yeah, I gotta take chances. Gotta push myself in different directions. Oh, you know what I'll do? I'll do the Michigan accent. People in Michigan won't like this.
I was about to say, I have a few friends in Michigan. I'm curious now.
All right, Dave likes this accent. Oh. Listen, you want the best hot sauce? Period. My uncle, he owns 100, maybe 200 acres up north. We go up there, we do some hunting, do some fishing, drink some beers. But it goes good with those Miller Lights. And listen, I don't know why you would pay anything more for anything greater than Miller Lights. All you need, you get yourself some hot sauce. You get some of that Smokies hot sauce. It's got the chipotle, and it's just a nice smoky taste of brown sauce. Rob, you would love it if listen. Put it on some Tostitos. You don't need to get any of that high fancy stuff. Tostitos, Dave's Way Hot sauce, and some Miller Lite. That's all you need. Period.
I'm sorry. That was the most amazing thing. I was trying to come in with like an accent. I was gonna toss in some. I like to say I got my Christopher Walken pretty down pat.
Mhm.
Like I can go like, oh my, it's tragic news. I wasn't planning on getting an ulcer from a hot sauce, but the spaghetti was too strong. Like I can do like that, and then like because impressions, doing accents, it's like two different horses. Like my buddy, not why I call him my buddy, my cousin, he is a bit of the marijuana side, I would say, and at 2 o'clock in the morning, he was outside of our garage, and I'm like, what the fuck is he doing? And he's filming a spider. And what he filmed was nature and its element. And I swear to you, I'm getting goosebumps even talking about it.
Eh,
He got a lot of enjoyment out of watching the video. I was more like, this is really freaking cool. It was a spider that caught a fly in its web, and it went down, wrapped it, came back up, went down again, and wrapped it. And it did it 10 or 15 times, which kept wrapping it. And at the ending, he zoomed in. The spider went up to the fly, and you get to see this spider kind of lean back, and then two
oh,
daggers right to
oh,
the head, dude, with its teeth. And I'm like, you just filmed like a nature documentary. And he goes, dude, isn't this awesome? So then what I did was I saw that and I voiced over it, and I went, here we
oh.
have the deadly spider crawling in its element and capturing a kill. And then I would do this
Right.
nature
Oh, that's
documentary
great.
thing, but I would do it like I would do that accent when we're at the store and stuff. Like, here we have my cousin as he slowly picks out which candy bar he wants to eat today because he just hit a giant bong rip. And he just looks at me, he's like,
Right.
I love this. Like, it ended up turning into a comedy bit that I was writing for a little while, where it was like, if you could have one person narrate your life,
Oh
who
yeah.
would it be? You can't do somebody funny like Christopher Walken, and you can't do somebody serious like Don Corleone when you're brushing your teeth. Like, make sure you get
Right.
the teeth in the back. Gotta make sure you get the molars. Don't want to skip any edges, or you'll be swimming with the fishes. But then I ended up
Right.
turning and saying, like, the real voice that is perfect to narrate your life is the one you have inside your head, because it's
Right.
really you. And that was the
Right.
kind of the comedy bit.
Oh, that's hilarious. That's hilarious. Yeah, Morgan Freeman. I'd have him narrate me.
Can you do a Morgan Freeman?
Oh man, I could mess it up pretty good. I don't think I've even ever tried. Wait, he's down here. Take your coffee. Take your coffee, and I used to be on electric company. Yeah, that's the best I can do.
It's pretty good.
That's the best I can do.
Mine is like a knockoff of like the Family Guy version, where ever since I was a little boy, people have
There you go.
enjoyed the sound of my voice. And either
That's
get
it. You
busy
got
talking or you get busy dying.
you got it. You got it. You nail it. I'm just speaking low and slow. That's
I,
all I was doing.
I was like, because I heard this one podcast that I introduced David to. It's called The Crab Feast with Ryan Sickler and Jay Larson. And they had this one guy on there that did these impressions, like he did a Mark Wahlberg, and he was saying like how much of it was like a muscle that you had to practice it, or you might lose it. And they're like, you do a Jim Carrey. He's like, I haven't done that in 10 years. I wouldn't be able to. I don't remember what it was like. And then he goes, can you do a Mark Wahlberg? And all he does is go, hey, everybody, I'm from Boston. Hey, how's it going? It's like coming with like this quiet, but like yelling kind of, and like,
Right.
what? Oh, how you doing? Yeah, everybody, I'm here, man. I'm the fucking show. Yeah, and then like coming out with like
Yeah.
this tone, and it's like it's really interesting to see the craft and like being able to try
Well,
and practice it so much.
I love that. I love that you're right. It's a craft. It's not again, it's not just like, oh, God came down and gave me this talent. It's like, I mean, to some extent, maybe it's you're born with it, but he hones it, he works at it, and he gets better at it. And when he's out of practice, he can't do it as well. I was listening to like an old Howard Stern. It might have been from like 2012, and he had Pat Benatar in the studio, and she's there to sing tunes, and he's like, but he was just like, hey, how about this? And he just threw out this song. She's like, ooh, I'm gonna have to remember the words to it. And he's like, really? She's like, you gotta rehearse this stuff. You gotta practice it. And to him, he's like, I know all the words. How come you don't know all the words? But it's her craft, and she doesn't want to sound like crap either. She has to, as certainly all vocalists age, they have to start going like, Elton John, he's not singing like he did in the 70s. He can't, but he can make adjustments and still make it sound great, sing it in a different key. But yeah, it's all a craft. You don't just go like, oh, I'm going to bust this out. No problem. Yeah, you could sound terrible.
They did that with
Yeah, like
Bryan Cranston from AC/DC, because eventually he had to stop playing with the band because his hearing got so bad he couldn't hear how like to come into a song. So what the band would do is when you see him sing, they're playing with him. He's not playing with the band because they're
yeah,
trying to find where he's going to pause and they're trying to guess that. So eventually he had to stop because his hearing just became deaf. But what happened
yeah,
was they asked him to sing a song and perform, and so they were going to try it one more time because they couldn't just keep doing that every live performance. They were just like, it's getting too much for us. We got to find somebody else or do something.
right.
But when he came back on to sing a song, he pulled up the lyrics of one of his songs on his phone, and he was reading the lyrics. And it's like, how do you create something and then not remember every word? And he's like, because I don't practice anymore. Like, it's that thing that just
Right.
goes away.
Yeah, absolutely. I might make a correction here. I don't think it's Bryan Cranston. Bryan Cranston's the guy from Breaking Bad. But I don't know the AC/DC guy's name. Brian, I'm talking about Bryan Cranston,
Yeah,
Breaking Bad, and
I'm realizing because those are the two
Malcolm in the
names.
Middle.
Those are the two guys I get mixed up all the time is Bryan Cranston and Bryan Johnson. Not because they look
Bryan
alike,
Johnson.
it's because their last names are just I don't know. I always get them mixed up. I think Bryan Johnson's the one from Malcolm in the Middle.
I have. Listen, I couldn't tell you a Goo Goo Dolls song from a Gin Blossoms tune. Like I don't know if this was satire or if this actually happened, but I saw a headline and it wasn't The Onion, but it was like Gin Blossoms plays some festival, and all they did was play Goo Goo Dolls tunes, and nobody noticed. Because they're two bands that came out at the same time. They have the same kind of music, and they have G's in their name. And so, like for me, who's not paying attention all that well, I'm like, they're the same. It'll make them one band. Who cares?
So when it comes to like improv, when you're like, do you have to stay on top of like doing research and all these other types of things, like with pop culture, things that are trendy to make sure that you can still stay on top with your game? Because I mean, I feel like eventually you could just keep repeating the same kind of like old school style stuff, but then the crowd starts to shift. Like you're seeing a lot of millennials out there now. You're seeing a lot of people like in their 20s where you're like, well, like you're looking at me probably like you're just a baby, that whole thing. But it changes, like the times have changed, gas isn't a nickel. I'm not saying you're that old. I'm just saying
Right, right.
it's not the jokes. Like if you look at Whose Lines in Anyway, I watched the very first episode they did compared to their newest episode, and it was a complete shift to see like the humor was and then she said my pipe, and then it was like this whole laughter, and that was the funny thing. And then now it's like, and then she grabbed the chains and whips, and I was like, let's get the party started. And you get to see the whole
Right,
shift of it all. I'm like, it's crazy to
right.
see what we've canceled and then what we've now progressed to.
Well, right. And I had what was it? There was a movie that somebody recommended to me. This is years ago, but even years ago, it had come out before that. It was So I Married an Axe Murderer. So somebody said like, oh, so maybe it came out. It was Mike Myers' film, and it came out in say 91, something like that. And somebody said, oh, you haven't seen that? And now he's telling me this, and it's maybe 2001. I'm like, no, I never saw that. I don't know. It didn't look that good to me. He goes, no, it's hilarious. So I saw it. And I'm like, number one, this thing's a piece of garbage. But number two, the jokes that Mike Myers was doing in 91 actually was fresh. But 10 years later, they're played. And I know I'm seeing it for the first time, but it doesn't mean I'm going to laugh at played jokes. And you're right. You got to like, I think by improvising as much as those Whose Line Is It Anyway guys do, they improvise constantly. It forces their brains to push outside of boxes because they're like, I am sick of doing another first date at a restaurant scene. I've done thousands of those. I gotta continue to push my brain to come up with new and original takes on things. But you're right. You also, I mean, when I was taking class at Second City, so that was the early 90s, and they used to give, you know, back when they had paper, and they would give it out to you and say like, hey, here's some of the books about improv you might want to look into. And here are some other references or, you know, reference books and things that'll help get you up to speed in a referential way. Like, you know, there used to be these series of books that were called Don't Know Much About, and then it was like ... So you know, there's all these books. Don't know much about history. Don't know much about Shakespeare. And it would give you like abbreviated understandings of these things, so you had a working knowledge. Because you're right, you can't just continue to, you know, work off of your old references. You know, I'm not going to sit here and go like, oh, that's just like Mr. Furley from Three's Company. Everyone's like, what? You know, like that's 40 years old. It's not funny. Nobody gets it. But the thing, so as much as I say that, and I do say that to my students, like, read the paper. Like, even if you don't, and I don't mean like the actual newspaper, but like read headlines, stay up on the news, and stay up on not just current events, but stay up on entertainment news. You know, everything cultural you can get is fair game. Here's where I did a big giant face plant in a scene one time, in a show one time. This was definitely over 10 years ago, where we were supposed to read hashtags. So I show up to the show, and they gave me a bunch of these little slips of paper that had hashtag whatever, hashtag Oakland Raiders, who knows? And I didn't know what a hashtag was, you know? But I mean, and I'm saying it's more than 10 years ago.
You mean
So I'm looking at this,
the number symbol?
You know how bad it was? Again, I'm talking like a metaphorical face plant. I'm going up, tic-tac-toe symbol, Jim Carrey.
Tic-tac-toe symbol, Jim Carrey.
And they're like, say hashtag. I'm like, I don't know what you're talking about, you know, because I just didn't.
I just remember X's and O's.
Right. I wasn't on Twitter. This is pre-Facebook for me. So I think I got on Facebook in 2009. So it was probably like, could have been 2005, and I'm up on the show, and they're throwing hashtag at me, and I'm like, I am well behind. Like, I don't know what you're talking about. But it's stuff like that you need to be culturally on top of things, or else you're going to look like an idiot up there.
Yeah, you got to stay relevant with the times. It's weird because comedy's shifted so much where it feels like I start watching stand-up now, and it's like the only jokes they crack are like dick jokes or jokes about themselves. And I feel like it's because we've gotten too, I guess, cancel culture-ish, where it's like they're afraid to go out of the realm. Like, it's safe to make fun of yourself because people can't yell at you for making fun of yourself. It's like, it's me.
Yeah.
I can make fun of my dick if I want. And then you look at, like, I saw Dave Chappelle's special Sticks and Stones that came out, I think it was 2 years ago or last year. And
Okay.
he literally called the audience idiots. He's like, you know what? I'm going to do an impression for you guys. If you do anything wrong in your life, you're fucking finished. You know who that is? And everybody's laughing. He goes, it's you, because you guys are the hardest people I've ever had to perform with in my entire fucking life. And everyone's clapping and laughing. But, like, I even missed over that. And then I had to rewatch it like 3 or 4 times. And I was like, oh my God, like, he's saying some really real stuff where it's like, it has a message. And he said it in like a documentary afterwards. It was like, I was literally stating what's wrong with everything going on, but everyone was just hearing the joke side of it. And it brought into perspective what I've always thought was the best way to receive information is through joking manner and through having humor, because we take way too much seriousness in life every single day. And that's like what gives the only reason I practice my impressions at times is not for my own amusement. Because honestly, if I start talking like Christopher Walken once, it is so hard to snap out of it. It is like you end up doing it the whole day where people are like, can you stop Well, like my buddy gets such a giant kick out of it where he loves hearing it. And we don't really hang out a whole lot because work and, life and all that. But
Right.
when we
Right.
do, he'll be like, dude, please give me a Captain Sulu. I'm like, what? He's like, just
Captain Sulu.
when we go to the drive-through, act like Captain Sulu. And the woman be like,
Yeah.
hi, welcome to McDonald's. What can I get you today? I'm like, oh my. And then I'll do this whole thing and he's just like dying laughing. I'm like, if it brings you that humor, but it gets me to practice it like that. And then I have a Jerry Seinfeld impression where I'm like, I mean, what's the deal? Come
Right.
on. Like that. I hate Jerry Seinfeld. So that's like his favorite one. But it's practicing it and doing it, like, not only because like I want to get better at it, because I like seeing the fun and the laughter and the amusement he gets out of it. If I crack out like my Scooby-Doo impression, if I crack out my Goofy impression, they're all things I've just heard and been able to mimic. Like, you ever seen the show
Right.
Heroes?
I know it,
There's a
but I've
girl
never
on
watched an
there
episode.
who had a copycat superpower where she could see something and then recreate it. She saw the woman cut a tomato into a rose, and then she immediately did like 100 of them. And I was like,
Oh,
that's what I
cool.
can do with voices. If I hear something, I can recreate that sentence, but I can't go out of that spectrum to go into like a whole different thing.
Do you know, just to totally name drop you, you know that he's an Asian actor who's in Heroes. He's also in Hawaii Five-0.
Hiro Nakamoto.
Uh, I don't know. I know his real name, Masioka. Masioka.
That's probably Hiro Nakamoto, the main, because there's not that many Chinese people or Asian people on Heroes.
Yeah, yeah. So, and I don't know. So I did a gig with Second City, and what's it? Oh yeah, I'm gonna mess up the name, but it's a corporation, like an entertainment company in Japan. So I went to Japan and taught for Second City for 2 weeks in 2014, and that guy Masioka was the reason, because he took improv classes at Second City in Hollywood, and then I think he got Heroes. So he's like, I'm not gonna finish out the term. I'm kind of good, like I got cast on Heroes, so I'm gonna not take classes anymore.
I got a big gig I kind of want to go towards. And
Right.
do you think that it's harder to get famous or stardom now, or is it easier because of social media? Because I feel like it's difficult in the way of trying to get like a gig or a role in a movie, like a major producing film, but it's really quick to become like a Vine or a TikTok star or something simple
Yeah.
like that.
Well, and there's even, in one way, it seems like it's easier, and I guess you have to define what your level of fame is, but there's just so many more outlets. I mean, I watch an old movie and go like, oh, there's that actor again. Like they use and reuse these actors. And I've got the Comcast thing, so I can scroll down and look at them. I'm like, oh yeah, he was in that movie I saw, a couple weeks ago. So it's there weren't that many actors, and there weren't as many opportunities. Now you and I could like, hey, let's do a web series. It'll be 8 episodes long, and we'll shoot it and we'll post it up there. And who knows, certainly there are web series that take off, and a bigger entity comes in and says like, let's clean that up and market it. You guys are on to something there. So there, and just with all the cable networks, and just now with all the streaming services, there's so many ways. And you're right. And to me, my radar does not really include all the TikTok, YouTube stars. I'm just not into it. I don't follow it. But my daughters will say like, oh, that guy's huge on YouTube. I'm like, he is? All right, dude. But so yeah, you want to get famous, there's tons of ways now, and that's I mean that's a good thing. That I mean, imagine if it was like 1970 and you and I had an idea for a show. We're not getting that off the ground unless we pitch it to somebody with money and connections, but right now we have an idea for a show. We could make all kinds of headway for cheap and get it into the eyes of the right people.
I have to
And that's
connect
brilliant.
you with a few of my friends who do like these audio drama things. I started to get like, that's the one podcast I do if I could do it over again. I feel like I would do like an audio drama, just being able to relax, like the Dungeons and Dragons people that do voices, or
Right.
my buddy I did a couple cameos on called the Backwoods Radio Show, where it takes place in like a Florida place, kind of.
Yeah.
Everybody's a cannibal, kind of, and it's like this crazy backwoods. It's not me talking trash on Florida. I had grandparents that used to live there, but I'm just saying they've got gators. Okay, they've got gators.
Right.
And
Yeah.
he was like, here's a couple lines, but what I really love, and it really brings in a perspective of what could be in a movie, is when a writer writes a script and they let the actor be able to improv it as well. I think it shows great character and class to the actor to be able to fall into that role a little bit more. And my buddy, his name's Michael LaRusso, gave me this script for a character I had created, where it's literally a guy that is been captured by aliens, and he's now known as the town painter, but instead of painting things, he just gets high off the paint. So he's got this. So I'm sitting there thinking, what character do I want to go with to make this guy? Like, we got the idea, but how should he sound? And I'm looking at a lot of John Brewer's stuff, like, man, you don't
Jim Brewer.
know. Yeah, Jim Brewer. Thank you
Jim
for
Brewer.
correcting me on these names. This
Right.
is a big thing.
Goat boy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, or he's sitting there
It's
like,
hilarious.
yeah, man. Like, so I would do this whole thing, and I was like getting high off the paints like a classic action, man. But it was like a big thing where I was trying to decide, do I want to play it like Jim Brewer, or do I want to play it like Jeffrey Lebowski? You know,
Right.
I forgot his actor's name too. Jeez, what's his name?
Jeff Bridges.
Jeff Bridges, yeah. Do I want
The
to play
dude.
like Jeff
The
Bridges?
dude,
No,
man.
man. I got my ordained minister's license under the freaking Church of the Latter-Saint Dude. I can't believe I don't remember his name. That movie got me into bowling hard. I mean,
you got to roll. I don't roll on Shabbos.
yeah, don't roll on Shabbos. Shut the fuck up, Donnie. I love that, dude.
Well, so here's something. If I'm plugging anything, this is the most insane thing, is that there's a guy, I do this improvised game show type of a thing online with people from around here. But this one dude was approached, and like he was getting emails from this guy in Nairobi, just a stranger, who said, like, give me $30,000 for a screenplay and I'll write it for you. And this guy, Steve, American guy, is like, I'll give you $50 if you write me something. And the guy said, okay. And he wrote him this thing. And Steve took that script and put it up in a theater. I mean, and did this thing word for word, right? And he did that maybe 3 times, where it's like, I'll pay him $50 to do a script. Why not? His scripts are kind of ridiculous. So this guy in Nairobi wrote a script called The Big Lebowski 2. So a sequel to The Big Lebowski. Now, Nairobi guy has never seen the movie. Steve sent him 2 paragraphs explaining the movie and gave him a list of the characters. So Nairobi guy writes The Big Lebowski 2, and we're doing a reading of it on August 15th. We've had a few, and it's all Zoom. We've had a few rehearsals. I play Brant, which is the Philip Seymour Hoffman character. Like, all right, no, put that back. Thank you. Don't touch. Thank you. You know,
that's perfect impression.
Right. So the script has all kinds of mistakes in it, you know, and so the director's like, read the script exactly as written. You know, don't clean it up. So there's you'll say a line like this, where he'll kind of mix up somebody's dialogue line with action. So it might be like, hey, get out of here, he said, holding up his coffee cup. Like, that's your line. You know, that's your actual line, because he didn't delineate between the two. So just read it the way it is. And it is a scream. It's ridiculous. But it's just funny that you just said that. The Lebowski, I mean, I love Big Lebowski a lot. And so it's fun to do this. And especially I got cast as Brant. I'm like, oh, I'm all in. I love that character. That guy's ridiculous. And Philip Seymour Hoffman is brilliant.
Yeah, it's one of my all-time favorite movies. I try and live my life like the dude, where I just abide. And so it's mostly the reason why I hate the Eagles. It's like, I can't stand Hotel California only because the dude doesn't like it. So I'm like, he's got the best lifestyle. And what's funny is how many times I've watched that movie and I started picking up different things. Like I didn't know at the time I was on a Red Hot Chili Peppers kick for years, like all through high school.
Well,
And
Flea was one of the nihilists.
It's not fair. Like that whole thing that was freaking crazy. Like I said, whenever I hear something I can create, like have you ever seen Beer Fest, for instance? There's a German guy and he goes, "Grandpapa," and does this, and that's like the biggest joke with my friends. Like whenever we're out somewhere and someone's like, "I don't want to do that," but like, "What's Grandpapa?" Like just pop out with this, like you really picture lederhosen and stuff, and it's like,
right.
That's what I think the fun part about these types of movies is like old cult movies, those types of things. They're comedy, but that's something that stood the test of time. Like that's funny today.
Oh, it's insane. It's so ahead of its time. I assembled a table and chairs in my basement. I ordered this thing, got to assemble it. I'm like, fuck, this is going to suck. So I found a podcast, and the podcast was 2 hours of these two guys talking about the Big Lebowski.
Oh, God.
It was very entertaining. They just picked it apart. And at the end, I still didn't know what the hell the thing was about, and that's what's brilliant about it, is that it's just such a strange mess of great actors and great dialogue and great scenes put together. You just go like, I don't know what that was, but I don't give a shit. It's awesome. And that's why it's broken. It just breaks the mold. It's so different.
And the subtle writing for that too, like when the dude's dunking Jeff Bridges' head in the toilet, and he's like, "Where's the money, Lebowski? Where's the fucking money, Lebowski?" And he pulls his head back up. He goes, "I think it's down there somewhere. Let me take another look." And then he shoves his head back in the thing like that. There was so much that built up into that character and that role. And I listened to the Jeff Bridges documentary afterwards about that, like asking about how his time was, and he goes, "The whole entire time we shot that movie for months, my wife and my little daughter kept asking if they could come to set. And then finally I was like, all right, you guys can come to the set." And it happened to be the day that we were shooting Gutterball, which was the fake movie in The Big Lebowski where he was dreaming and he was going under all the girls' legs and looking up. So his little daughter was like 8 years old at the time, and his wife are watching him go under all these women's legs. And he was like, it was the most uncomfortable thing in my entire life. But that movie had so many points, like, "Does the word upset you, Lebowski? Vagina." And then he's like, "What? Lady parts. Does it upset you?" I'm like, I'm sitting there uncomfortable, like, oh my God. But like, you have your moments where you're like Jeff Bridges, where you're getting your head dunked in a toilet. Then you have your moments when you get angry and you turn into, oh God,
Walter
Sobchak. Where he asked Larry about his homework. And that is the funniest freaking, and that was a lot of improv too, where he goes, "Larry, is this your homework, Larry? Is this your homework, Larry? Is this your homework, Larry?" Then after 5 or 10 times of him asking if it's his homework, he goes, "Look, we know you took the money, and we know this is your homework." And then he like just throws that back in there. He goes, "Larry, I want you to look out that window. And I want you to realize this is what happens when you fuck a stranger in the ass." And he grabs a golf club and starts beating the crap out of the car. Well, they PG'd that movie. When they PG'd it in theaters and did it like that, or did it for DVD sets and like for people like younger audiences to listen to, they changed that line as "this is what happens when you fuck a stranger in the ass." They changed it to "this is what happens when you meet a stranger in the Alps." And people were like, "What?" And that totally tanked some of the movie ratings because of that. And I was like, sometimes a line might seem like it crosses it, but it's just perfect for that scenario.
Yeah. Going back to what was the character, the painter character? There is
Vaude, I think her name was.
Well, no, but you deciding, am I going to go with Jim Brewer? Am I going to go with the dude for this painter guy? There's a game that we play. You might have seen it. Maybe it's on Whose Line Is It Anyway? Called Panel of Experts. So you have like, say, 3 people sitting in chairs, and the audience gives them suggestions as to what magazines they're the editors of, and a lot of times they make them up. They'll say like Caterpillars Weekly, and so now hello, I'm the editor of Caterpillars Weekly, right? And then you answer questions from the audience. But what I tell my students is like, when you can, look for the character that we don't expect. So let's say they gave you, you're the editor of Guns and Ammo, right? I mean, we know what the stereotype is going to be. We know, like, hey, man, we like to shoot, we like bullshit, like we know that kind of guy. Be the opposite. Go like, hello, I'm the editor of Guns and Ammo. So what we want to do is shoot and cap as many bullets in people's asses as possible, right? Like, you still have that attitude, but you're just like a different type of character that we don't expect. So like, if it's supposed to be a stoner dude, don't give him a stoner dude. Give him like an East Coast Harvard intellectual who is still a stoner dude, who is still huffing
Yeah.
paint.
Kind of
you
like
know?
a little bit of like what you would see is like not following the stereotypical role, but switching it into a different route.
Right, because we see what would normally come, and you want to find interesting, multifaceted characters. Take the road less traveled. Find that thing that they don't see coming, and they go like, "Oh my god, this is awesome! It's a stoner cowboy. I did not think of that."
So I created in my senior year of high school before I went like into college, and I had to take the dreaded speech class where I did
Right.
an improv speech because I left all my notes at home about hot pockets for 15 minutes, and everyone's like, you should have got an A, but the teacher was like, you did it so jokingly, I'm giving you a D. I'm like, all right, you suck.
Oh,
But it was really freaking good, dude. I went like,
yeah.
first, it's either hot or it's super fucking cold. How do we find a medium here, guys? Do I stick it in the microwave or I stick it in the oven? Which works best for you? What happens if you don't own an oven or a microwave? Does that mean I have the results of the toaster? Well, I set my house on fire. How do I do this? And it was like this whole, quick on the toe thinking. I was so nervous going up there, but I just flowed into it. But first school in high school, what I did was we had to make these videos like an infomercial, and you had to sell a product. So I have this
Right.
recording of my buddy and me selling a sham wow. So I was like, how do I do this? I'm going to do it like an infomercial. Like, hi, you're watching an infomercial and we're about to sell you the sham wow. You know why? Because it's wow. It's sham and a wow. And I'm here with Vin Diesel, and it's my buddy in an American tank top, and he's got his neck like this where it's all like scrunched in, and he goes, hi. And I'm like, I'm here with superstar Vin Diesel. And it's just some random person we called Vin Diesel.
Right. He's not doing an impression.
He's not doing the impression of the actor. He's just
Right.
a random guy named Vin Diesel. And we joked around about it. And we were shooting how to get the water spots off his car with the sham wow. But
Right.
it was raining outside. So we were trying to wipe the rain off, and then like it kept raining. So it's like you just kept doing it over and over again.
Yeah.
And I was like, look at all those water spots. They're gone. And then it's like a flash to show you the car, and it's like all still soaking wet. And I'm like, look at all this water. And I would twist the rag and no water would come out. And I'd be like, look at all that water, super absorbent. But it came from when I was a kid. I would be at my buddy's house, and this is before like, you could snap your fingers and the freaking TV channel changes. The
Right.
TV remote would be missing at like 2:00 in the morning. I'm laying on my buddy's bed, too lazy to look for it. So it was the ones where you have to get up and you have to physically hit the button.
Right.
So I'm sitting there watching a infomercial for a CD, like where they used to sell the music, like the best of, and it's like this
Right.
on. So I turned it into a joke. It's the best of Bobby Brown, 45 songs on 45 CDs. That's a song a CD. Like that whole whose line is it type thing. And I was like, it brought me to a point where I had a knife maker on my podcast, and he was telling me, like, trying to get his knives out there. I was like, why don't you make a commercial like the one in Grand Theft Auto? And if you sat there watching Grand Theft Auto, the TV in the game long enough, the TV would flip over to a knife commercial, and it would be this woman going, look at all these fucking knives. I got this big ass knife for $49.99. If you call right now, I'll give you it for $22. Sometimes you're in the middle of a blizzard. What do you got to do? You got to eat people. And I'm like, that is priceless and perfect to get you to that point of like, that's what comedy is. Sometimes it's got to either be so ridiculous that it gets a laugh, or it's just so real that it gets people to, okay, I can relate.
Right. Oh my God, that is hilarious. Wow. Yeah. Grand Theft Auto is definitely in my blind spot. I've never played it. I mean, I've only seen the commercials for it.
You're not missing much.
Oh, really? I don't know. I'm also hyper self-aware that certain things I might get addicted to. So there's like,
That's Grand Theft Auto.
there's PlayStation, Xbox. I'm like, man, I know me. And I know that I might never come out of a basement if I start playing some kind of Xbox, got to get to the next level type of a game. Like I can't do that.
Well, it
Yeah, that's
correlates to
too.
your real life too. It's a challenge. Doing improv is a challenge, trying to make sure you can always, overcome a random toss out or a random idea. I like when if someone tossed out, you know, give me a proctologist or something like that. Like I would consider that a challenge. I wouldn't ignore it like a lot of people would, just because of the concept of like, hey, you picked it. If it's gonna get awkward, it's gonna get awkward. But we're in this ride together. Let's make some magic happen.
Right. I always say, again, there's that snickering little jackass in the audience who said something like proctologist and thinks that him saying the suggestion is the comedy. And it's like, all right, whatever, dude. But I tell my students, use their suggestion in a smart way and throw it back in their face. Like you said, like take the challenge, show them that we can do a scene that's not just a stupid shock value scene, but it's actually smart with smart characters and still funny without being filthy, and throw it back in their faces, because that's they thought it would be a hurdle for us, but we can do it and screw it. However, when it's a class, a student show, and I'm hosting it, I'm not going to challenge brand new people with, like, here, erection, go. Like, I'm not going to do that to them. You need a little bit more under your belt before you start taking on those types of challenges.
In the words,
Especially sometimes it's the first time that they're on a stage. I'm not going to just throw it on something crazy at them.
I've always wanted to, do improv or go out and try it. And I think, I had a comedian on here, Steve Simone, where I was telling him some jokes and he was like, that's funny. And I was like, a lot of the bits like you start to learn about that people do, or these stories that they tell, is some of my favorite type of comedy, because it's true, but it's always hiding something severely dark. There's always a funny side that they turn it into. And he was asking, he's like, where did you get all these stories from? Like, he ever tries doing stand up? And that's what actually got me to try and write some jokes down. Like, I was 20 years old when I figured out Michael Jordan and Magic Johnson weren't the same person. And that goes down a whole different bit. That was just because I'm not a basketball guy. I never knew. So I only knew Space Jam, and I thought MJ and MJ. So my brain correlated that for so long. And then
Right.
those moments in life where like you look at it, like you can either be embarrassed by it or you can laugh your ass off at it and turn it into something and roll with the punches.
I'm telling you, I'm up in front of an audience saying tic-tac-toe symbol, Twitter? Tic-tac-toe symbol, best life ever? Like, what are we talking about here? And every audience is like looking at me like, oh my God, dude. Like, I have no idea. Give me 10 more years and I'll catch up.
What would be your best advice for people that are trying to start into the realm of comedy, or maybe even getting held back because they're too afraid of what people might think?
Yeah. I mean, that's the thing, is I do get a lot of people. I mean, over the years, I've had people who say like, "Oh, I want to take improv classes," and never do, because it's scary. And when I have students on day one taking their first improv class, I always say like, what you did to just walk through that door is huge. You know how many people want to take classes but just can't get the nerve? So the fact that, I know it doesn't feel like you've done anything, but the fact that you're in here and ready to take this class is an accomplishment. But I I think, to just broadly, it's hard to broadly say comedy. Like, if I'm going to say stand-up comedy, I've done a little bit and I know some stand-ups and I know a little bit about the road to get good. um it's hard. To be a stand-up comedian, you have to say to yourself, I have to be okay with sucking. I have to be okay with like going up last at some open mic on a Tuesday when it's a blizzard and playing for those two people who are ignoring me. Like you gotta just be, um, you gotta be like a professional about it. Like you just have to go at it and do it as a job. And every time you get on that stage, you're getting closer to getting better and better and better and honing that craft. And you just have to have a thick skin. And I know some people that are brilliant that are still, struggling. It ain't easy. There's a lot of people out there doing it. For improv, you take an improv class, and you're certainly not on the island that you are when you're doing stand up. It's a cooperative thing, and that's where I say, don't worry about uh, showboating and making yourself look good. If you just lean on your castmates and make them look good and roll with things and listen and respond, you're going to be way better off. If you're in there going like, man, I got to make sure I'm funny this week, you're going to suck. And you're probably going to trample over some people on the way there. And people are going to go like, man, because improv comes down to, I always call them sandbox rules. It's like if you and three kids are in a sandbox playing, and there's one kid who's like hogging all the trucks and won't let you do anything, like you don't want to play with. Yeah, you beat his ass.
Motherfucker with a shovel, and you bury him in that sandbox.
Right, but you don't want to play with that person. You want to be the person that everyone wants to play with, and that's somebody who's supportive and giving, and yeah. So improv is the same way. You can see it. You can see, like, let's say you have a class of 16 people, and sometimes I'll just call people up and say like, hey, how about blank and blank? Come on up to the stage. You're going to do this scene. But sometimes I just let people volunteer themselves. So it's like, oh, we need two people for this next thing. And so one person gets up, and you can see other people who will either jump up to join that person because they know that person is fun to play with, or somebody gets up and they go like, I'm just gonna wait for the next one. Because the person who jumps up is somebody who gets on a stage and throws you under the bus, or like they're doing a scene, it's like, oh, you're not very good at making pizzas, maybe you should go back to the home. And you're like, oh, you're just gonna shit on me out here? That's bullshit. You don't want to play with that person. You want the person that plays fun, makes you look good. We make each other look good.
John Lennon from the Beatles.
I'm John Lennon from the Beatles. I like to do lots of drugs and write trippy songs.
Wait, you're right. So that's awesome, but you're also somewhat Don Corleone. You could blend.
It's because the freaking jaw. All you got to do is shift your jaw forward, like someone punched the top of your mouth and left the bottom part out, and it's like
you get this weird impression of like turning into a psycho killer musician.
That's so. Yeah, I want to hear you do John Lennon, but saying Don Corleone stuff.
Oh, jeez.
So tell me about going to the mattresses and sleeping with the fishes, and one day I'm going to ask you for a favor, but do it as John Lennon.
If I start saying one day and that day will never come, it turns into Don Corleone, because like I said, if I hear a line, I can mimic it. But what I've heard of John Lennon is the Dewey Cox version of John Lennon from when Paul Rudd played him. Like, well, Dewey, let's trip on some LSD. Maybe one day you'll be sleeping with the fishes. Like, it ends up forming into that because my brain's like, we've heard this before. Click onto that tune. I got to figure out how to fix that.
Yeah, that's a hard one. Corleone's crushing it. You gotta go into the Dunkin' Donuts. I don't know. So that Liverpool accent. I mean, McCartney sounds that way too.
I mean, we don't even let Paul McCartney write the songs anymore. He just keeps playing the same fucking tune like Ringo Starr. Strum that motherfucker. Like, you know, then end up turning into like I always like doing like a retro reggae. And like my dad was like, once you hit puberty, you'll be able to sound like Shaggy. When I was a kid, he used to say that. Weird if you said that
voice
now.
crack.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But he's like Zoink Scoob. Like he used to be able to do it so good. And he's like, if you just practice like these things, like, can you give me a Ray Romano? I'm like, I can't do that one. It's too nasally for me. And then
Yeah.
there's some of them out there where it's like it's in your vocal range. You got the range to
Right.
do it, so find what it is. And oh gosh, like, you know, you can do
Right.
like a goofy or whatever. Just like
Right.
find what it is. And it's the funniest thing I love about voice acting is watching the videos behind them where they film the actors' faces, because their faces are so expression. And I'm like, that's what life is about, is expression.
Yeah. Yeah. You know, the what used to crack me up as a kid is I'd watch Scooby-Doo, and so there's Scooby-Doo, there's America's Top 40, and then there was the Super Friends with like Superman and Batman and Robin and all that, the cartoon.
Justice League,
right? And so you had Casey Kasem, who is deceased now, but he used to do America's Top 40. You go like, and this one is by Jethro Tull, and it goes out to Sherry in Cucamonga, California, right? But so he is the voice of Shaggy. He's also the voice of Robin. So to me, what cracked me up is watching Super Friends, and anytime Robin would talk, I'm like, I hear Shaggy. I hear Shaggy's voice coming out of Robin's mouth right now. That is ridiculous. And I know it's Casey Kasem. You know, America's Top 40. I went to Wayne State. I got a job in radio. It pays pretty good. That's a radio commercial he used to do for Wayne State in the Detroit area.
That's another thing too you'll hear with some podcasters. They'll do the radio voice, and both my parents work in radio, so I was like, that's the one thing I don't want to do, because we're doing the show for about an hour to 2 hours long. So it's like trying to keep up with well, you're listening to Out of the Blank podcast, and we're going down. And then it's like I could do that, and then my uncle does the announcements for a baseball game where next up in this corner, it's with 32 home runs, and then it just starts going. He does that whole announcement.
Yeah.
I was like, I don't want to do any of that. I just want to talk. And then if I want to go into a Brooklyn accent, or if I want to come down with a little bit of Boston, I can be able to pop out with that pastrami on rye. I got to work on that, but still. Nice. I saw a woman from New Jersey pumping her gas, and she goes, how do I do this? I'm like, what? She goes, in New Jersey, it's illegal to pump your own gas. I'm like, what? Oh, yeah, that's a law. So it's like that in Oregon, too. You can't pump your own gas. It's illegal.
Is it a COVID thing, or it's always been that way?
It's always been that way. You can't pump your own gas. So I asked her, I was like, you're how old and you don't know how to pump your own gas? She's like, yeah, in Jersey, they don't let us pump our own gas, so I don't know how to work this thing. And I'm like, okay. So I helped her, and she goes, I'm initially from Minnesota, and then came out with that Minnesota accent, and I was like, I fucking hear it. I see it too.
That's hilarious. Minnesota, all those Fargo. Oh, yeah, hey.
Oh, yeah.
How's that?
Cheese.
Oh, I like the little guy
on there, eh? That sounds Canadian.
Yeah. Well, there's a fine line. That you want to screw me over, have one person do a Canadian accent and somebody else be from Minnesota. I won't be able to figure it out.
You know what still gets me, though, is an Irish accent. As soon as I hear that, my just nipples perk up, and I'm like, all right, here we go.
Well, like I said, I have certain things that I go to far too often, so I'm very aware of trying to push out of that and try to, hit more original new ground, at least for me. But I was, there's a couple of guys that I'll do improv with that these guys love to hear themselves do their own Irish accent. They don't care about the characters. They don't care about the scene. They just want to hear themselves do the Irish accent. And so they wanted me to be one of them in the pub, and talking like that,
drinking a brew.
And I decided to not speak in that. Like I was playing a character who was unable to vocalize, and they were all over me, but I wouldn't break. Like, what's the matter with you, Seamus? Like,
I feel like there's an episode where some dude was talking about
he was talking about it like an Indian accent, and then mine immediately went to Apu from Simpsons, like, none of our reasons mean nothing. All of our choices, if you could look into your heart and you will see the answer. And then like the guy's like shaking his head, no. And then they sick the dogs on you and goes, oh, where's the exit? First door to your left. And he goes, oh, thank you. And then he opens up the door and walks out. And that's from the Simpsons movie. But like I said, every time I do an impression, it's got to be something I've heard. If I've heard it, I can recreate it. But man, it's a fun route, dude. It's always fun. I mean, we literally just did this for an hour 15, and it went by pretty quick for me.
Like
I mean,
that.
yeah,
Absolutely.
but
hasn't poured. I don't have derecho on us yet.
I see the clouds getting dark in the back. It's
it is getting darker out here.
You can start saying, before the storm hit, I did a podcast with a kid, and we did amazing impressions.
It was the last thing I did. Wouldn't that suck if somebody,
yeah, if you died and like your last thing was like impressions on like a podcast, like
he thought he was safe sitting on his own front porch and he got struck by lightning.
I was just about to say that. Imagine if right now, like I'm looking through the mirror that's sitting behind you or the window behind you, and I'm like seeing the clouds get dark. Imagine a lightning bolt like perfectly like a movie. But
hey,
Kevin, I'm gonna let you go, man. I appreciate you doing the podcast, dude.
Yeah, this is great, man.
Is there anything you want to promote besides, honestly, thank you to David. Shout out to him out there from Way Hot Sauce who set this up for us. But is there anything you want to promote, man?
Yeah, I don't know. I just wrote an article for boingboing.net. It's just got a bunch of stories, just kind of random. I don't know if they have a main focus. But one of the guys who's an editor for it used to be on my improv team way back in the day in Chicago. He's in California now. But the article is about when I was originally on an improv team in Chicago with Tina Fey and Amy Poehler, and we came up with the name for our improv team. So there is he even embedded a video into this article of Tina and Amy on the Tonight Show when Jay Leno was hosting it, talking about, how'd you guys meet? Oh, we met through this improv team in Chicago. So and they even give a little bit of the history of it on the Tonight Show. Of course, I'm sitting in my house going like, oh my God, I can't believe they're sitting there talking about our stupid little improv team. But so I wrote this article about the naming of Inside Vladimir. That's the name of the improv team. So boingboing.net, the naming of Inside Vladimir. I'm sure if you just Googled Tina and Amy or Amy, it'll come up. And then I'm doing this show on Friday nights called Wisecracking, which is kind of like a version. Is it
every Friday night?
Every Friday at 8 Central. And it is, it's kind of like playing apples to apples, except we get to write our own answers. And the audience who tunes in votes on the answers anonymously. They don't know I wrote it. They just see an answer to a prompt, and you get votes. So we're competing against each other, but it's all these comedians doing this thing. Wisecracking. If you just put in Wisecracking, you'll find it. Fridays at 8, and that's a lot of fun. And what I like about it is you're not just sitting there, you're actually voting and interacting, as opposed to just watching improv or anything like that. So yeah, those are my two things right now. Article, Wisecracking.
I'll make sure I link everything in the description so people can find it. And I'm going to challenge myself, because I've always challenged you throughout this episode to do an impression. I'm going to end it like Barack Obama. My fellow Americans, this has been another episode of Out of the Blank podcast.